Hey everybody, thank you for watching the class plan video for Tuesday, October 24th. So in today's video, we are going to go over, you can follow along if you want, at class plans, October 24th, scroll down to class plan video. So today we're going to go over just a tiny bit of housekeeping. And then I'm going to model today's made skill, which is a sequence analysis of the Walking Dead cold open. A sequence analysis is a technique used to close read film and TV for theme and form, i.e. we're going to be looking at composition, sound, photography, editing, audience addressed, acting style, and or costumes. Then I'm going to go over the final project teams, and then also how to access and complete the Google Doc activity, which is a collaborative sequence analysis. So these videos are going to be like this. I'll model the skill and then ask you guys to reproduce it in some sort of activity. At the end, I'll give you an overview of the podcast assignment and then what to expect from class, which is face-to-face, so please come to class on Thursday, October 26th. So I realized that I did not ask you specifically to put a title on your paper, which is due on Thursday. If you would, please remember to give your literary analysis essays a unique title that announces to the reader what they can expect to find in the essay that follows. And if you don't know how to do that kind of title, log back into the MLA directory of periodicals, scroll through some of the essays that you get when you search, and then look at the titling conventions in that search field. So for example, this is a nice clean one. So The Cause of Thunder, Nature and Justice in King Lear. So what we want is, we know that Paul Cantor's key terms are going to be nature and justice in King Lear. Those are general terms that the algorithm and also the reader can use to decide whether or not this is an article of interest. And then the stuff that comes before the colon is specific to the paper. So how can you craft a title that is both unique to your own paper, that announces like the unique components that will follow, and also gives the reader a sense of what the key terms are. So do your best on that. And then always remember, even if your teachers don't ask you, you need to include a title. Okay, moving on. So here is the very, very opening sequence of all of The Walking Dead. So episode 1, cold open. So in this very first opening scene, we're going to watch Rick stop for gas and then end up killing a zombie girl. So that's sort of what happens at the level of narrative, right? So the next thing that we want to think about in terms of sequence analysis is composition. So the composition of the sequence, it starts with an open form frame in which the empty street that Rick's car zooms down seems to slide out past the edges of the frame. The road provides contrast with the forest, or I guess you could also say the forest provides contrast with the roads. But the initial emptiness emphasizes a feeling that Rick is sort of the last human on Earth, or at the very least, alone, right? But then as the scene progresses, this initial emptiness is going to get filled up. First with the stoplight, then with the overturned vehicles, with Rick himself in his sheriff's car and his gas can. The initial overturned, burned out, busted vehicles will give way to the campsite, to items that are both valuable and garbagey. We're eventually going to see a couple of corpses, the no gas sign, and then that all sets us up for the final confrontation with the zombie girl, and then over the composition goes from, right, like empty and wide open to like filled up and kind of close, which helps us, which helps the I don't know, the director create like scary narrative mood. So, um, for the most part, this is one long shot or edited to look like one long shot, mostly except for that initial at medium range. So the effect is that we get, and this is this would be photography. Um, the effect of this sort of medium range shot is that we get Rick and the world that he inhabits at the same time, right? We don't really know that much more than Rick. So as he sees things, we see things. Um, it's kind of the same with the sound, right? There's no music until Rick talks to the zombie. There's no talking. We just get the things in the world produce their own noises. So the sign clinks, the birds chirp, the flies buzz around the dead corpse, and then again, all of this contributes to the mood so that right here after I hit play again, Rick is going to hear the telltale shuffling of the zombie, and then that is going to create for us in the viewer and in Rick a certain amount of fear. So. All right, so another component of thinking about sequence analysis would be editing, right? So this first cold open with its slow reveal establishes for us a world um, that has changed by comparing the changes to what used to be. I mean, I think another editing choice, right, is this like framing device where what used to be or what colors Rick's expectation are the bear and the slippers. And so that gets boxed out underneath the car in this like tight shot. And the only thing that he expects is like, here's this kid in this disaster area. But then the scene's edited together so that what Rick expects is no longer what's true, right?
Little girl? I'm a policeman. Little girl. Don't be afraid, okay? Little girl?
All right, zombie kid. All right, couple things here. Just like in any other type of writing, modes of audience address are like a key component to sequence analysis and to creating effective TV and movies, right? So a couple things here. Throughout this whole scene, Rick has acted for us, right, for the viewer, for the most part, as like a mirror through which we watch this world unfold, right? We see what he sees, and then we know how to think about it. And because of that point of view, we get this moment where we get to feel both like this big reveal, the world is not what he expects, and then the tables sort of get turned, right? It's kind of a topsy-turvy logic opening sequence. So, the little girl doesn't need to be afraid, but Rick needs to be afraid. And now the point of view is going to switch from third person, us in the audience watching Rick, to us in first person, just watching the zombies without Rick interrupting us, right? So what effect does that switching from point of view have on audience? We might say it has a couple of effects, right? So first, I think we can think that the makers of the show know that their audience came to this show with a lot of expectations, right? This is a fan fiction show where people had read the comics, and they have a series of expectations about what will be in the show because it's an adaptation from these wildly popular comics. Second, when we, the viewer, are in the first person point of view, we become, to a certain extent, complicit in the activities on screen. So funny, and then final sound choices, no music until the cut in with the TV show sound, right? So, couple things. What does this all add up to, or what are some other considerations? I just, for starters, I'm kind of interested in the way that Rick's police car, the gun, the sound, the sort of composition that goes from open to closed, helps establish Rick as like the last civilized man in an uncivilized world. And yet, there's some irony, both in the way that civilization in Savage gets established, because even though Rick is trying to bring order, he does so to a certain extent in these like trappings of civilization, i.e., the patrol car and the hat and the badge and the gun, that there are no longer any institutions that authorize those civilizing forces. And so I wonder, is the show leaving us to wonder, how does the sheriff hat and the jacket signify in the absence of state power, right? So is it even possible for Rick to, accomplish his goals? So I'll go ahead and leave it there. All right, so that was just an example of what a sequence analysis might look like. And so now if you guys go back into, so we're back here into the class plan for Tuesday. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see this chart right here. All right, a couple things about the chart. So first, your final project teams are listed. These are the teams that you're going to stay in throughout the remote classroom and also for the podcast. All right, so for today, if you would, just click on the link where you find your name. All right, and then that's going to open up a collaborative Google Doc. All right, pay close attention to the directions. So every group is going to have a different sequence to analyze. So this first group is going to have to pay special attention to the sequence between approximately minute 16 to minute 22, right? It's when Rick wakes up in the hospital. And so then you scroll down and you find the part of the sequence analysis that's assigned to you. So Brianna's got composition, Josh has sound, Ashna has photography, etc. All right, so after watching and paying close attention to your scene, you just fill in the sequence or the area with signifies. So what happens in the selected sequence on the level of plot, and what's the function of the sequence within the larger narrative of the action. So for example, Rick wakes up in the hospital and wanders around. Function of this sequence is whatever you think the function of the sequence is, right? All right, and then just, sorry, spelling's not the best. Continue this all the way down. So the frame, the space, the sets, etc. Same with Josh. Josh would do sound with music, no music, sound effects, blah, blah, blah. All right. So everybody spend, I don't know how long it should take, 10, 15 minutes filling out his or her part of the sequence analysis. All right, so why with the sequence analysis? Well, a couple reasons. First, I'm asking you to complete your own sequence analysis as um, a process document leading up to the podcast. So, as a blog post number 4, which is due on November 9th at 5 p.m., post it to your class feed, 400 to 500 words long. It's going to ask you to make a claim in response to how does the scene you chose figure life after nature. And then to develop that claim, you'll do a description of the narrative, describe a couple details, and then explain how the analysis or how the narrative and the details help support your claim. So it's a similar order of operations to what you performed in the literary analysis paper, but because the media is now visual and oral, we have to practice like a certain different sets of operations. All right. Other reason is if you go to the podcast assignment, which is the big final assignment for this section, in which you draw on the first season of The Walking Dead to create your own podcast in a group of 5, where you show the relationship between the show and the possibility of life after nature. One required component of the podcast is that you need to include at least 3 pieces of evidence. And one of those pieces of evidence can be the type of sequence analysis that we're practicing. So again, we're doing the sequence analysis to better understand the show, to give us a common vocabulary, to talk about the details that make up TV and video, the ways in which the choices that directors and showrunners, etc., make to communicate information to us so that we can then perform the same sorts of analysis in both the lower stakes and the final assignments. Okay, so finally, for Thursday, I need for you all to come to class. And when you come to class, Mr. Charlie Bennett, who is the undergraduate programming and engagement librarian, is going to come and talk to you about the rhetorical strategies and best practices for podcasting, right? So he's going to talk to you about some of the components that are required in our assignment, as well as details about a little bit of detail on what sorts of tools you can use, but also how the tools that you use or the choices that you make, i.e., interviews, repetition of your introduction, repetition of certain sounds, how to cut in, excuse me, certain audio, when to cut in that audio, how all of those things add up to an interesting and persuasive rhetorical document. So again, please be in class at your normal time on Thursday for Mr. Bennett's presentation. And then I will be back answering emails, I want to say at the earliest Saturday afternoon. So if you have any questions, send them over the weekend, and I will do my absolute best to get back to you no later than Monday the 30th. So, all right, guys, thank you very much for watching. And then I hope that if you have any questions, I can answer them a little bit later. Thanks.